gentlemen. Killing these people, trust me.
You're listening to Meadows and Makers podcast
with Jack, Doud, and making stuff. Peace.
Hello, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, good night, wherever you are in the space-time continuum. My name is Greg, and also known as Making Stuff on the Steam It blockchain. And today is another episode of the Meadows and Makers podcast. This podcast is all about trying to live more self-reliantly and take care of your health, wealth, and self-empowerment in today's modern age. And I like to bring on guests that are inspiring and moving towards some of that information and some of that realm in their personal lives. So today's going to be a really great show. I was able to line up something with my uncle, actually, and we had a really good conversation recently when I was on my trip up into the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And so we got together and we started talking about stuff at the cabin and things like that, and thought he would be a great guest to bring on the show and talk about some of this information with you guys. So right up front, just some housekeeping stuff that I needed to get out of the way is that this show is for educational and informational purposes only, or educational and entertainment purposes only, and the views and opinions of this show are my own and those of my guests, and they do not reflect on MSP Waves and the wonderful people that keep this community going and keep this program running and all that good stuff. So if anybody has any feedback or anything like that, please send it my way. And I'd love to hear from you guys. So when I get these show posts up, please give me any feedback that you have, and love to hear from you guys. So with that being said, I want to introduce today's guest. Like I said, today's guest is my uncle Tom, but he is known to the outside world as Dr. Doud, I guess. He is a doctor of optometry and an ophthalmologist, I guess you would say. And so yeah, like I said, Uncle Tom, thank you so much for coming on the show today and taking some time out of your day to come and chat with my audience.
Well, thank you very much, Greg, and thanks to your audience for having me. It's a pleasure. I look forward to. We had a good conversation up north, so I'm sure it's going to be good here too. So I look forward to it very much.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much again. And like I said before we started the show, what I usually do with all my guests is maybe just have them do a little brief introduction of who you are and a little bit about your background. Sure.
So I'm, one minor detail, I'm actually optometrist, so I'm not a surgeon. An ophthalmologist would be a surgeon, but
okay.
I've worked extensively in ophthalmology too. So a lot of references there.
Okay.
But yeah, my kind of I'm a practicing optometrist, and I do a couple specialty things, and we'll get into that aren't typical optometry, but and it fits in your kind of looking at a more holistic model of how we interact with our environment, so.
Yep.
But I've just, little background of who I am personally is just someone who is really fascinated by how things work and has, taken a few deep dives into things outside of just what you learn in optometry school and that. And I think that's why Greg and I hit it off so much.
Yeah.
some good talks. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're very
yeah,
similar in that regard.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I'm passionate about searching for the truth and always looking for someone that can point me in a better direction in terms of that. So, but there is a lot of overlap with vision and what we can learn about how to optimize our world in vision. So hopefully I can give your audience a couple pearls that they can really enhance their life with. I'm hoping.
Yeah, I really think so because a lot of the stuff that we're talking about, you have some really good knowledge in specific information for definitely the topics of how to maintain good eye health, and you really blew my mind with a couple of those things that you were telling me, especially when it comes to the topic of artificial light. And
Yeah.
and that was something that we kind of very interesting that you were sharing was that blue light that comes off of most screens and devices can have some negative effects towards our sleep and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So did you want me to just jump into the blue light issue and we can go over that a little bit?
Yeah. If I see you have your screen up and you have the spectrum on there, and
Yeah. And this is a nice little, if you want, it's fluxometer.com. You can probably see the link to it, but they've done a nice little job of putting the visible spectrum up for different devices. So you can go through and change what device you're on, but you'll see that with all those, there's a difference from what I'm clicking through with these different devices and what we should experience, which here's outdoors. So
oh wow,
how we evolved and how we were meant to see light was a pretty uniform spectrum, but entering the modern electrified world, the spectrum changed. And now one thing that's pretty universal is there's a spike right around 450 nanometers in the blue light spectrum. And I'm no lighting engineer, but I'm guessing that, with the modern LED lights and that, if you're trying to get a highly efficient, it's a very strong part of the spectrum, you can create lighting cheaply and reduce energy use if you lean on that blue spectrum. Is probably the background there, right? But nonetheless, that would be a perfect way to ruin someone's eyes, is to look at a light that has a blue spike like that, right? So so often get patients who ask, like, well, why did they do that? Well, of course, when you're engineering a product, you don't necessarily know how that's going to affect the human retina or biology. You're just doing your job as you see it, So, and that's the big topic I think we'll cross talk a lot over is, there's great experts in scientific fields and they don't talk to each other, and that's like, if we can combine the best in physics and biology and all these different venues, we'll have a better handle on this stuff.
Yeah.
But what I like to just how I like to explain this issue, there is a problem with blue light, excessive blue light, and we can really separate it in two different problems. There's a daytime issue and there's a nighttime issue.
Okay.
So this is really, helps us see the daytime issue. And what that is just that excessive amounts of blue light, your retina absorbs it preferentially. And you have a couple pigments in the back of your eye. So zeaxanthine and lutein are the two pigments that our body uses and puts into the macula, which is where all this light energy absorbs in the back of the eye, and they dissipate that energy. So one of the things we do is we can test those actual levels in people. So and a good level, they've done long-term studies that if you're at 0.5, so this is a scale that runs from 0 to 1.0, okay? And if you're in the middle of that scale or up, 0.5 and up, then when they study those people a long time, they do real well in terms of not having macular degeneration and retinal problems. And that level is low, and it's commonly low. The average American is 0.34. And,
wow.
and I see people that come in that are 0.1. And that just means they live in the modern world, and they're probably like most people looking at a cell phone, looking at a computer in artificial light spectrums, and that blue light is taking the pigment out of the retina, and it's allowing more and more light to absorb in the deeper part of the retina, and that over time damages your retina. So it's correlated with retinal damage and aging of the back of the eye.
Whoa.
So you can think of this kind of like smoking. You can pretty directly look at the biology and why smoking is bad, but it doesn't mean that individuals can't smoke for many years and not show any evidence of disease, because it's a very slow, chronic, long-term process.
Yeah.
Although they've done tests where they've, even in young people, been able with the right instrumentation to see effects, short-term effects, but really where this is going to, injure people long-term is, they're going to work on a computer screen unprotected for many years.
Yeah.
And the problem when it happens, they're not going to really know why it occurred. Right. So,
wow. So naturally the retina wants to seek out blue light and take that in.
Exactly. So it just, like any material has its absorption criteria.
Okay.
And so based on, how it reflects or absorbs and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it really is like, imagine there was an evil scientist who was out trying to destroy retinas around the world. Well, he would probably invent an iPhone or
wow,
a modern device like this who's, and, nice thing about this, you can go and you can pull up just about anything. And, it shows that spike, and then it shows, and this is from FLUX site. If people aren't familiar, F.LUX is a software that you can download to most PCs. I know Windows 10 has its version, but if I turn FLUX on, not doing it, there we go. Wow, we removed the blue spike,
Oh, so that actually is applying some kind of filter or
right
to your screen on your phone or device or whatever.
Yeah. So, and like you can install FLUX, and then how I instruct people to do it too is what FLUX will do just with a basic install is it'll follow, it knows where you're at and like, your location, and it'll follow the sun, the diurnal curve of the sun, and it'll be bright in the daytime, and then it'll reduce the blue at night. Well, in reality,
really?
Yeah, in reality,
wow.
we don't want to ever look at a screen with that spike of blue light, and so
if you can prevent it, yeah, if you can prevent looking at it, then you don't want to, because it's gonna damage the retina or potentially quickly damage the retina.
So I don't know if you can pick up the color change I just did, but I opened my FLUX and turned all the blue off, so now my screen is kind of an orangey look. I don't know if that comes through real well, but
yeah. As soon as you hit that little button, I saw the graph go down, and then everything kind of turned into like an orange color.
Yeah, and so what FLUX will do just on the basic install is at noon it'll be bright like this, and then over time as the sun goes down it'll darken. But what what I would suggest people do is just do this, is drag it over so it's at its low point all the time. So
okay.
I'll bring it back up so that we can see better for the sake of this. But that's just, I would say consuming this artificial light, this excessive blue light is kind of on the order, if we were talking diet, excessive sugar consumption. One of my other deep dives is going in the whole diet exercise continuum. And that's why I think we'll talk about later, but how I got into some of understanding the stuff that's outside of my normal wheelhouse is going through things that drew me there. But, here's just another little fact we can correlate is they've correlated sugar consumption to dementia, right? So
really? Yeah.
So high sugar consumption. So there's a test your doctor would run for diabetes called hemoglobin A1C, and it tests basically how your sugar consumption, to simplify it, because it's looking at your blood and seeing if it's, changed due to sugar consumption. If you're not in the diabetic range, but you're just on the high of a level below that, your chance of ending up with dementia is greater. So we all, from a diet perspective, should want to, be almost on an anti-diabetic diet just for brain health optimization. So, and that's, one of my specialty areas. I work with kids with learning problems. And so that's why this whole brain thing is another interest of mine. But I'm just getting a little off tangent from the light, because it's a good analogy, is like a good light diet doesn't include this excessive amount of blue light. Just because everyone's doing it.
Yeah.
It's, we're social creatures, we love our devices and they're great and they're wonderful, but they need to come with a warning label. Like, I think hopefully someday there's going to be OSHA standards. When you buy a monitor, you buy a device, it's in the orange look that we just showed, and it's in that setting, and you have to click through and say okay to a few screens to get the aspect of it that would put excessive blue back in, just to protect people.
Yeah. So it would be as simple as just a software thing, like you just demonstrated.
Yeah. And any device now, like I know iPhone is a night shift, but any Android, any device has this in there, so that you can, and the trick, like on the night shift on the iPhone, would be you have to then go into the manual settings and just basically set it manually to stay on all day.
Okay.
So, but that would be a great practice just in terms of preserving the eye health. And the other thing that goes along with this is having your omega-3 levels. So, omega-3 is a cofactor in how we take in light in our retina. Our retina will scavenge and take most of the omega-3. It's a highly concentrated thing in your brain and in your retina, which is technically part of your brain, because it needs that to process light. So if you're high in omega-3s, you're going to process light better.
So where do you get a main source of omega-3 in your diet? Is that mainly coming from fish?
Yeah, so seafood would be primary, and it is always better to eat it directly than supplement. And there's a lot of problems with supplements, but especially omega-3 supplements. They need to be in the triglyceride format in order to be optimal, but it's still not as optimal. And we're gonna probably touch on Jack Kruse and what I've learned from him a little bit. And I can't even recreate all the chemistry, but there's an SN1 position that the omega-3 falls into if you're getting it from the real source of seafood that you can't get when it's processed. And so that is a critical thing, to try to get your omega-3 directly from seafood as much as you can. So.
Okay. Well, we had one of the listeners in the audience, Breeze, is saying she takes in too much sunlight. Is there an app to turn that to turn off the actual sun?
Oh no, but sun is your friend. So here's another thing, and it'll perhaps get me. It's kind of funny because when I listen to Jack Kruse, he hammers on optometrists and ophthalmologists and dermatologists for creating this idea that the sun is evil.
Oh yeah.
But the sun is your friend. But, like most things in life, it's a U curve, right? Meaning you've probably heard of these studies, but they looked at longevity and exercise. So if you're the couch potato, and I've kind of fallen back to that. I got to get back in the game on my exercise.
Yeah.
So, but then that person starts exercising, their health gets better and their longevity improves. But then if they get a fanatic about it and they're running marathons constantly, they've actually reversed, and their longevity statistics fall back to the couch potato level.
Really?
Yeah. So like most things, it's a balance. So like you need, so when you're outside, that spectrum is perfectly balanced the way your eye was engineered to see light.
Yeah.
And you're getting ultraviolet, infrared light, and all these things that really, your eye is engineered to take that in. Now, You can go to an excess. If you are a lifeguard or you are out in the sun constantly, you might want to wear a hat and, take, precautions and different things.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't worry about the spectrum per se. And there's and that the commenter makes up a good point, because if you look at our graph, if we go back to outdoors, there's a lot of blue light in there. So it's not just a matter that it's blue light, but it's isolated blue light.
Oh, okay.
So like if we took a percentage of this whole graph that's filled up by blue light and compared it to the percentage of this graph, right? So it's predominantly, it's a lot more as a percentage of all the light we're taking in, it's more blue. And it's not balanced and everything. So, but yeah, here's an optimal day of light. That's a good thing to just know. Like in a perfect world where, we can control the timing of everything. I know we're all working and we got jobs and these things, so we can't do this, but some people probably listening can. So your optimum day is you get up when the sun comes up and you go out and you actually get some of that natural sun directly in your eyes. If you wear glasses, you take them off and you just let sun, that upregulates your brain chemistry. Okay. So we'll talk about the nighttime issue of what's very particular about your brain and light at night in a little bit here, but the reverse. You probably heard of people with depression that use sad lights. They use a light in the morning to upregulate, and they found that helpful.
Yeah, I've heard about that.
For that, so it regulates and wakes up our brain and does some wonderful chemistry things that are a great aspect to our day. Get things going.
Yeah, and in this modern age, it is so many people work the 9 to 5, and they get in their car and they go straight into work, into a building, and maybe they don't even get that natural light. Maybe they even miss it.
Yeah, well, I know I've seen studies like this where they did a study in Arizona where something like 80% of the people there were deficient in vitamin D. So it makes your point is like in this area where I'm up here in Michigan and it's 30 degrees now, but and there's no UV, so I could go outside and it's just not in the atmosphere. But even in somewhere like Arizona, you go from your car to, if it's hot out, you go to your air-conditioned house and you exist inside most of the time. So you never get vitamin D, which is a huge thing in health, the way you're supposed to, because you're supposed to get it made in your skin when the sun hits your skin. That's how we naturally produce vitamin D. And if you look at about any disease process and vitamin D deficiency, that goes along with a lot of those. And it's a marker for really saying this person doesn't have enough sun.
Right. Yeah. I have some listeners that are up in Canada, and I know they suffer through that during the winter seasons. But one of my listeners doesn't have that problem at all. She lives in Limpopo, South Africa, and she gets all the sun she can ever get.
Yeah, that's great. Yep. Yeah, and where we are in our environment is a critical thing, and how we interact with our environment is a critical thing too. And it's not all just food, Yeah,
so every factor of the environment, really.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so you were telling me another interesting thing about this is that blue light will also keep you from starting that. Is it melatonin that your body produces to help you go to sleep or something?
Exactly, and that's another story. We have special cells that So about 15 years ago, and I've got this one up, but there's special ganglion cells that iPRGCs, and all their purpose is to tell our brain whether it's day or night. So, and this is a little to differentiate the day-night story. So you will, if you listen to the press, hear a lot of things more and more all the time about blue light or how devices are ruining kids' sleep and all that.
Mm-hmm.
But here's a little nuanced point of that is the amount of blue light that that hits your retina that will trigger this problem is like on the level of numbers of photons, right? So it's hardly anything. So what happens is these cells in your retina work simply in the blue spectrum. Well, that's good because we can do simple ways of blocking blue light and still function at night in artificial light and optimize our melatonin release. So, so after sundown, the way our body was engineered, you think about,
our ancestors, yeah,
exactly. And you think about, I think of like fad diets, right? Like, so a fad light diet is this crazy thing we did after we invented electricity. It's not, if we want to talk about what's not a fad is, well, we can go back before humans, before we, were optimized the way we were. Mammals and mammalian science was already figured out, right? So sun's light cycles and how that affected eyes and drives this, the brain. So when light hits that, it pushes back the melatonin release in your brain for 4 hours. So,
okay.
So picture a typical modern person. They're struggling to sleep. Sleep is a huge problem and a driver for many diseases.
Yeah.
And so if I have trouble sleeping, I might be on my iPhone, my iPad, my, TV, or maybe I'm even old school and I'm using a light to read a book, but I'm still getting artificial light in my eyes that are actually making my sleep worse. So, and it's more than a melatonin story. So there's more complexity to it. So these cells talk to something called the suprachiasmatic nucleus in our brain. And then there is a clock gene on every organ in your body. So when you dysregulate this light cycle, and again, this is a chronic long-term thing, but you can kind of open Pandora's box in terms of dysregulating a lot of your biology. So how you would circumvent this, generally speaking, is just you'd get some complete blue blocking glasses and put them on. And it may not be right when the sun goes down, but it could be a couple hours later. So for a person who normally, like in Michigan, we'll get to where it's going to be dark at 6 o'clock here pretty soon. I might not put my blue blockers on at 6, but maybe by 8 o'clock I'll have them on, and then at least that means by midnight my brain's able to start releasing melatonin and really getting me that effective restorative sleep, because that's the only way your brain can flush out toxins. Doesn't have a lymph system. It does this incredible chemistry thing, and you really need that optimized at night to really get your brain, working optimally. So, and just a little minor thing, I will run into a lot of patients who take oral melatonin, and that can be, some studies show that can be bad for your retina. So,
oh, really?
The really best way, I mean, if you're going to take it, I've done it for jet lag reasons and things where you can shift your sleep cycles.
Okay. A
short-term course of it, or if you have sleep problems and you're using it, here and there when you really need some help. But there is another little thing. Valerian root is another thing you can take for sleep instead if you want to take something.
Oh, really?
That's not gonna, have that negative effect on the retina.
I actually had a previous guest, Porter's. She lives she's another Canuck, and she talks about she talked about valerian root on my show.
Oh, really? Did she talk about how it smells?
Maybe a little bit, but
it always smells like dirty socks. So fair warning, you're gonna take it. It's a quick maneuver to get those pills out and get them in.
Yeah.
But I personally, I think it works great.
Okay.
I don't use it often, but when I do, really feel like I need some help sleeping. But if you use the blue blocking glasses, you'll notice it's something that you can notice the effect of. You get, and then you can still be on your device and everything. It's just the little problem I have with these articles I read and the news pieces is they're telling people to use, F-Lux and these different night shift and different things, which is great.
Yeah.
But they're purporting it to be a nighttime solution, that your kid's going to sleep better and that's just not they've done a study recently where they tested that out and it didn't help melatonin levels at all.
Oh.
And it makes sense if you look at the physics, because the amount of light that disrupts that signal is so small. So you can't turn it down. You have to block it completely to have proper effect. So like one commercial brand that folks can get on Amazon or probably other places if they're not a fan of Amazon, but is UVEX.
Okay.
And it's, they're like $8 or $10 or something. But they do, and I've tested them, they do totally block blue light.
Yeah.
And it's a simple, cheap way to get to optimize your health and your brain function.
Yeah. So Ron Dunn in the audience says that he's seen a bunch of old people wear those blue blockers. But, for all of us that are doing have this online presence and use social media a lot, we're always interfacing with these devices. And so, like you were saying, you told me it's like, you're going to look silly, but, who cares? You're saving your eyes,
Yeah. But there is Bono and other people that, make sunglasses cool, I guess. So you got to have the right style factor, I guess. The UVEX look isn't. I'll tell you. Well, if you're non-prescription, they have a nice wraparound one that's not bad. But the other is the fit over like your grandparents wore after cataract surgery for sure.
Okay.
Because
the aim of them is to keep out any of the blue light whatsoever.
Yeah.
So
more it can wrap around and really protect. And then another thing too would be you should sleep in total darkness. So if you really want to get to the nth degree about it, light on your skin can actually be a negative, and artificial light at night. So if you would want to be optimal, you wouldn't walk around in shorts in artificial light and everything. You'd cover your skin, but then you'd sleep in the dark, and you'd wear a face mask just to even block ambient light that you may not be able to block too. So
well, that's interesting, even on your skin.
Yeah, and I can't tell you the quantity. It's much less important than your eyes. But yes, they've done studies where they've shined blue light on skin and actually seen some effects. And eating late at night is a circadian rhythm disruptor. So circadian rhythm is just the terminology for those night and day cycles that our body is tuned to. So from our evolutionary perspective, we are tied to night and day.
Yeah.
That's how our operating system works.
So
and it'll never, ever change.
Yeah. So you're saying if you're not getting proper melatonin, you can't actually enter into your restorative sleep cycle.
Right. So it's kind of just simple physics. Like, when I tell people about this blue blocking and I can see them just kind of like start to roll their eyes and go, please let me, this is what kind of hole did I drop down into? It's simple physics. It's like pick some up and drop it and see if if gravity still works the way you thought it did. That same physics principle is at play here with blue light hitting your retina. You can't, be like different than any other human being. We all have the same blueprint. We're all wired the same way.
Yeah.
So, as weird as it looks to wear orange glasses at night, you got choices to make.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's really cool. Maybe that's why I had such intense dreams when I was a kid, is because I remember as a kid, I guess our parents made us turn off all the lights and all that kind of stuff, and I don't know. Well, I guess maybe you also don't have that as many worries when you're a kid too. That could be a factor.
I think you're touching on something there. I think anyone intuitively could be like, "Hey, I went camping and I felt better for some reason." You
Yeah.
know, uh, and that's then there's even an EMF thing we can talk about too. Is like, so for sleep is everything, right? So if you can sleep good, um, there's not too many better ways to optimize your health. So one other thing you can do is just try to remove all electricity from the envelope of where your sleeping environment is.
Hmm.
So a way to biohack that is to just get one of those little electrical meters that people have, and you take the negative lead, and you can connect it to a wire and put it out and ground it in the ground,
Mm-hmm.
and check the electricity that's running through you.
Okay.
And then you can go to your circuit breaker in your house and turn off different circuits and see which ones kill, because you'd be surprised if you try this. You think, well, I'll just turn all the lights off and that'll probably do it. And then you retest it and you say, well, now I'm going to unplug everything in my room and try that. But you're only really going to get it to zero out when you literally kill the circuits, because there's dirty energy running in those wires around your so in
Your
my house,
sleeping area.
yeah, so in my house it's 4 circuits, because it's 2 circuits that run our kitchens underneath our bedroom, and then there's a couple circuits in our bedroom. And it's just physics. Like, the weird thing is too, it's interference ranges, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I think just as you start to kill other circuits, it might make it better or worse, but it actually is kind of paradoxically different than you'd expect, because there's waves knock each other waves out, they either amplify or subtract. But so that's you can just test that. But if someone wants to really optimized, you would remove as much EMF in your sleep environment. The simple thing is, like, God forbid you're not have your cell phone near you and all that. With any EMF, distance is your friend. So just moving a few feet away.
So it'd be good to have your phone or device or whatever outside of the room where you're sleeping.
Yeah, distance doesn't have to be 100 feet away, but just a little distance away is going to help.
Okay. Yeah. So I was looking into some people ground themselves while they sleep. Have you heard anything positive benefits of grounding? Like putting something in your bed that helps you ground to earth or something, and health benefits of that.
Yes, but what I've come to learn too is there's a problem with that, in terms of like that you plug what seems to be a ground in your outlet, but there can actually be problems with that.
Oh, really?
So people that have looked into this, and I'm no expert, but have issues with, I would really want it to be tested out to make sure you're really grounding, that you kind of know for sure that ground is really a ground. Because there's also issues that I've heard with reverse energy flows in these electrical systems and things. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of problematic. In theory, if you can ground yourself, absolutely. I think
So if you would do it, you would want to run a line directly to ground and not interfere with any other electrical source, probably.
yeah, and test it out, because if you take it to the nth degree, sometimes you think even when you're staked in the ground, you're zero electricity, right? And I'm no electrical engineer, but there's even electricity bleeding off. Now, if you're in a pretty rural environment, I think you're pretty safe. But a lot of people are in an area where you might have some devices or cables running underground that you think you're grounding and you're not.
Yeah.
Not my expertise, but that's just things that people have encountered.
Yeah, I've had conversations with my buddy Robbie, actually, and he used to do these experiments, and you can make a battery out of just inserting electrodes into the ground. So I mean,
Yeah. Well, that's
the telephone companies used to do that. Actually, they used to run these rods in the ground at their telephone stations to keep the station running, and so that's where he came up with testing it out.
What could go wrong there? But I've heard people invented ways to like have small electrical devices sitting next to the microwave oven, and they would use the energy coming out of there to like repower the device. So,
Oh, cool.
yeah. Electricity, I was pretty good at physics, but it's the one area that's always been puzzling to me.
Yeah, me too. That's why I became a mechanical engineer, because
Yeah.
I couldn't see the electrons, so they didn't exist to me.
Yes, I know. That's like I could get the problems right, but I would walk away going, yeah, but I don't know. I just still whatever. But it's a critical issue. Like we are electrical
Beings, yeah.
units, basically, yeah. So it's critical to life. Our mitochondria are the source of really about everything that runs our health. So
Yeah. So an audience, Rondon in the audience asks, he's asking if you know the wavelength, and he says, would blocking 380 to 460 nanometers be sufficient? And so from what you said is that you need to block it entirely. There's no amount that you can take in. If you take in even the smallest amount of that blue light, right, it will disrupt that melatonin production.
yeah, I've seen some stuff that maybe a little of the green spectrum is an issue for. So I think you'd want to be blocking somewhere up into like the 550 and below range to make sure you're really. I mean, if you're gonna wear orange glasses, right?
Might as well go all the way.
Yeah. Once you got the look down, don't take any chances, right? But yeah, and so I do make prescription ones and tint the lenses, and we have a tint that you can use that's a 550 blocker. So if it'll just block it'll just knock the spectrum from 550 on down.
Okay. So yeah, this is very critical for a lot of people in my audience, because like I said, we're using these devices all the time, being on social media, and one of the audience members, the DJ that comes on right after me, Crimson Clad, she said that she wears these blue blockers, so she's keen on it, but yeah, it's a big thing.
And keep in mind, too, we do this with our patients all the time. We do have daytime blue blocking, and that's become an industry standard within optometry. And you'll see it's basically built off anti-reflection coating technology. If you've had that in your lenses, you can kind of look at I'm looking at mine right now. And
so like polarized lenses or something like that?
It's not quite polarization. So polarization will get the wavelength that's going in one direction, but anti-reflection just cuts down the reflection of the lenses. It was really, really created to just keep glare out of eyeglass lenses,
Yeah.
Irritating glare. But then they just worked with the chemistry of it to reflect blue. So the newer types of anti-reflective lenses will have a blue. If you see the reflection off the lens, it'll look kind of blue. And that's pretty standard now. You'll see it. If you just pay attention to a lot of people's glasses out there, you look at the right angle, you'll get a little blue reflection coming back. And that's just helping to reduce this same daytime issue, the spike of blue light that we talked about. So, and another just tip too is a lot of people can't install F-Lux. They work in a commercial setting. They can't change. You can get overlays. I didn't send you this, but I know one outfit is called lowbluelights.com, I believe. And they will have all kinds of products that serve this kind of concern.
So it's something you put over your screen?
Yeah, like an overlay.
Okay. Yeah, it's I suffer from this too. Is that I'm trying to keep up on, usually at the end of the day or something, trying to keep up with the news, things that are going on, and I will, I'll check my phone. Sometimes I'll be on my phone very late. So, and I have had lots of problems falling asleep in the past. Usually, have a real difficulty getting to sleep. And as soon as you told me that, I was like, well, hell, that's probably it.
Explain some things. Yeah. If you see my page now, this is some of their filters for different products.
Oh, neat.
Blue light filters. So you can, and we can pull up their glasses, maybe.
Oh, cool.
Not that I'm saying their glasses or things. Well, I would say this, just, randomly, I do trust that they're going to be doing good blue blocking, but I have bought some things on Amazon that were claimed to be blue blocking and weren't. So
Okay.
I have a way of testing them in my office to see if there's a total blocking, but so you do be a little cautious, but so I would trust.
So these guys are a good source, in your opinion?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So that's lowbluelights.com?
Yeah.
Cool.
And they have a little bit here, why block blue light, if you want to learn more. But you can, that's in the thing. If you want to learn more about that, I'm sure, once it's an issue, there's, all kinds of resources you can learn about it. But it's one of these issues that sadly, we have these whole sleep clinics. I bet if you went to the best sleep clinic in your state or area and asked them about blue light at night and melatonin, they kind of look at you and go, what are you talking about? So, and they're doing wonderful work. They're probably doing great studies on people and checking their REM and their different sleep, aspects, but we're not cross-talking between the physics of how your light sleep cycles are working, and other, professionals.
Okay. Yeah. Geez, if, we live in this time where it is, that's how most people make a living is sitting in an office and usually in front of a computer. So, all these devices to be putting off this light spectrum, and it'd be critical for most people, I think, to look into some of this stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And for children, I just saw a study, the average amount of time a teenager spends with a device outside of school, because there's some now in our area, that's 8 hours of school you're looking at a computer screen, but regardless, it's 7 hours they're spending on average looking at their iPhone or device or something. So, which, there's an ADD epidemic. There's all these issues with folks, and you can't sleep good. You're not going to be optimal in terms of your performance. So, and you kind of see it too, just anecdotally, you see where we've lost a lot of these musicians, but that's kind of like the extreme example, right? Is they're in a huge EMF light spectrum on a regular basis late at night, right? So they're kind of, maybe we could say, canaries in the coal mine. We hear those stories all the time.
Yeah. I was looking into, some of the things that I've read, and one of them, and one of the guys that I looked into is John Taylor Gatto, and he talks a lot about the public education system and how a lot of it is kind of made so that people just kind of become very obedient type people, and then a lot of the programming that's on the television and things like that, these commercials. There's another book I was reading by it was Jim Keith wrote a book called Mass Control: Engineering Human Consciousness, and he was talking about the commercials are designed so that they create short attention spans, essentially.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of these things, just like you're saying, the environment has a huge factor to play in humans programming, essentially, how we behave.
Yeah, and you're kind of going into more than just the faulty light spectrum, but it's a lot of that is, and they knew this to begin with, is a dopamine trigger. So you just are like So, playing video games, or just if you're on Facebook, Twitter, you're constantly, and we all do some of this one, I'm,
Oh
I'm,
yeah.
I'm a Twitter guy now, right? So
Yeah, me too.
I learned so much, and and it's great, but it is like this, you do need to unplug at some point, because and that's just modern life too. Like, we weren't really engineered to have, read 100 emails, then look at all these, look at, it's great, but
Yeah.
it's just like, you do need to unplug and, settle your brain, and take a time to get away from it, because it is a mind control thing. I mean, you can take it to whatever level you think. It's simple as, like, you want more viewers,
Yeah.
you're gonna draw them in by methodologies that have been studied, that are going to draw those people in, right? Now,
Yeah.
you have other things you're trying to accomplish too.
Mm-hmm.
They're a little darker, but I think it's pretty obvious the science is there, that they've figured a lot of that stuff out, and they're making efforts in that area. So
Yeah. Yeah, I like to call them they, them, those, the powers that should not be.
yeah, but I think a lot of people are waking up to it. There is quite an awakening. It's just, even though we know some of this stuff, it's still hard to pull away.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that was a big issue. I recently went to that conference in Philadelphia. It's Anarchadelphia, and this was one of the big topics. Was we've got all this information now, but a lot of it is being able to put this information into action. Well, we don't want to see the world go in this direction. Well, what can we do to actually move it in a better direction and take those actions? So, a lot of it. The first step is to be able to take in that information, and then kind of the next step is to be able to apply the information. So, in reality, so.
Yeah, and if you can just look at every avenue, like this little simple thing we've talked about is, I don't think there was a sinister plan to ruin retinas by artificial light, but it certainly worked out that way.
Yeah.
But just by being aware of how, I think that's kind of the awakening people are getting, that if you're just following the narrow path and just doing what everyone else is doing, you might not be optimal.
Right.
That's
right.
the big thing. If you can get people to just kind of,
kind of wake up to that fact. Yeah.
Yeah.
And well, like you were saying, everything everything is a balance too, I think.
Yeah.
And so that is one of the challenges, is to try to be self-reflective and realize when you're out of balance in different areas, and maybe taking things in one extreme or the other, and try to get back to a balanced situation.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so I know keep staying on the topic of eye health. One of the other things that you do is you do vision therapy, and maybe if you want to talk a little bit about what vision therapy is and how that helps people.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been practicing optometry since '92, and I was kind of surprising that I came into vision therapy, ended up in that specialty. My avenue was more eye disease. I was fortunate to go to Bascom Palmer, which is like the Mayo Clinic of eye disease, and well, very much on the traditional medical model, an ophthalmology institute, and very prestigious, and it was a great thing. But as I started practicing in my private practice, I had people that would complain of, things that I knew they were telling me the truth, but I didn't have the means to really test. So I went to a colleague who I knew was into vision therapy, and usually this is kids that are having complaints in school, and teachers are sensing something's wrong. They're having headaches. They're having blurry vision, but it's not an eyeglass problem. So I went back to school for it, basically learned. And then once you know better and you learn this, you realize I need to be treating these folks, because sadly, so few doctors in my profession do this sort of work. And there's so many kids that need the help, but simply put, it's there's a functional aspect of vision. So we have two major visual centers. That might be the best way to enter into the discussion.
Okay.
One is our central vision center, and it's run through our conscious channels, and we're all experts at it. It's the what you see is what you get. You consciously look at something and you discern what it is, even though we can break down complexities of that. That's not even what it seems like, but that's one big channel. But then the other channel is an ambient center that helps us with movement. Okay, so that's the area that's mostly dysfunctional. So we work with a lot of kids and where their skills. You could think of it like this: vision is learned. So when we're born, humans are different than other mammals. We really have to be nurtured and grow, at early ages. We're not ready for life initially, and we have to. Our brains have to learn how to do things, and especially our visual system has to learn.
Yeah.
And for some people, they just don't learn certain things, and I'll get into some of those specifics. But and how developmental psychologists kind of describe this is, as you're developing, if you look at normal human development, you have these little phases. So from maybe age 3 to 4, your job is to learn X. Well, if you didn't learn it by age 4, you don't go back and really learn it properly. You just kind of go through life with a little less than optimal development in that area. And that's true in some of these visual problems. So if we go to a couple specifics, like one would be convergence insufficiency. So if the basic test for that is I'd hold up, I use a little device that has a metal ball on it, but you could use the tip of a pencil or whatever. So you can go test people in your family for this. Very simple is you bring that tip in and tell them to report when they see double.
Okay.
And you observe what they do. Now, some people will observe double vision at surprisingly a long range out. And some people will never say they see double, but if you watch their eyes, one of their eyes will slip out. So they won't be using their two eyes together, even though they don't see double. The brain just turns off or suppresses that eye that swung out. So what's going on for that person is a little bit of a depth perception problem. So this is 5% of the population. This is 15% of kids with ADD problems. But what it can manifest is all kinds of symptoms, and it's quite variable. I could tell you stories. People we worked with had horrible chronic migraines that when we just simply fixed this little depth perception problem, they were fine.
Okay.
To some people that they do pretty good. But one of my first therapy cases, funny story I tell people, was a young man who was a great athlete. And after a little while in therapy, he said, you know what, Dr. Doud, when I go to hit the baseball, I always see two of them. The crazy thing is this kid was probably leading the league in hitting,
Wow.
And so it kind of shows how you can be really good in some aspects of vision and struggle in others.
Okay.
But so that's a common problem we encounter and very easy to fix. It does take bringing someone in the office, going through a series of, exercises with them so that they really heal themselves ultimately, but you got to put them again in the right environment. So you're kind of like what you're doing in vision therapy is just not assuming anything. Let's just start over and let's give you a learning process you should have had when you were born and for whatever reason got messed up. And let's give you a rich environment you can live in for a while and really relearn this stuff. And so that's something within a couple months we can typically get someone so they're back focusing and seeing clearer.
So what is the standard procedure for getting somebody to correct this depth perception issue? Is it a function of somebody? I think I remember you talking about it at the cabin, and you were saying something like these people have maybe like a more narrow range of vision. They're only focused in like a certain area in front of them, and then this is to be able to open that up so that you're having like using more of your peripheral vision or something like that.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's that's an aspect of vision, functional vision, that affects not only this, but also tracking, which I'll touch on next. But so we do a map where we have them stare straight ahead at a target, and we bring a little white dot in from the side and have them report when they see it. And surprisingly, these folks can have very tunnel vision. So it's a way to test functional vision and how someone is using their vision. So it doesn't mean, for example, that they can't see in the periphery. They're just not using it properly. So, you could have someone with severe glaucoma that truly that area of vision is gone. They can't, no matter how hard they try. Or you can have stroke patients that literally do lose parts of their vision. Okay. That's not at play here. And we have a way of opening that back up. But and that kind of explains, we get this question a lot too, is, hey, my son is great at playing video games, so his vision must be good. Well, vision's very complex. You can be really good in that central little core where you're good, and then poor in your periphery. So, and that's a big correlation with folks who have motion sickness, right? So how we can connect those dots is, if I'm turning my peripheral vision off, there's a miscommunication that gives me that nausea. So if everything's working good, my peripheral vision is communicating and telling me that I'm moving, let's say in this car, and my vestibular system that does my balance is sending the same signal, and everything's good because we're all in agreement. But if my peripheral vision is not turned on and I'm getting a mixed signal that I'm not moving in my vision and I am moving in my vestibular system, and then that's where the problem can occur. So
okay, so what is vestibular? What does that mean?
That is the inner ear part of your vestibular system. So you have these canals that run different directions, and when you move your head, there's little cilia in there that feel the movement of that inner ear fluid and tell the brain how we're rotated, so we can orient ourselves in space.
Okay.
So the whole vestibular system is how we do balance, along with our visual system. So a great way you can kind of get a sense of, like I talked about, there's this central system that we all know well because it's conscious to us. But if you want to get a feel for this peripheral system, this functional system, if you just balance on one foot and then close your eyes and compare how much harder is it to balance with your eyes closed versus with them open, you'll get an intuitive feel of, like, it's kind of spooky. I'm doing all this visual work all the time to balance myself, and I'm not even aware that it's going on. It's a nice comparison.
Oh, interesting.
So people have, yes, functionally a very collapsed field. So they're really, so another problem, that's a good segue to another problem we have, is a tracking problem. This is very common. So in kids who have reading problems, so in our area, they call them Title I in some cases. But anyway, just let's take, if you went to your local elementary school, 500 kids, show me the 100 or 50 that are really, we just are struggling because we can't teach them to read.
Okay.
When they studied those, 90% of them have this eye movement problem.
Wow.
So and a simple thing you can do is just have someone read, hold the print up so you can see their eyes clearly when they're reading, and watch what their eyes do when they read. And what you'll see is a quick flicker that our eyes make jumps. Okay. So reading fundamentally requires you to be good at making what we call saccades, technical word for the quick eye movements.
Okay.
And so you need to keep making these quick eye movements, and some of that is dependent on our peripheral vision in a microscopic way. So an analogy, I just to describe the reading process, how humans do reading, think about it like this. Imagine I take a snapshot of 4 or 5 words, close my eyes, move over, take a new snapshot. That's literally how our brain pieces together reading. So if we've done, like you see like an old movie, or you used to get these little like cards you could flip, and you'd actually see like almost a mini movie.
Yeah.
Shots, running by fast, our brain melds them together. Mm-hmm. So when you pick up a book and read, you get this beautiful perception that you're moving your eyes smoothly across the page. But if
Okay.
you watch someone do it, you'll see right away that's not how the brain's doing it. So the important part of that is to understand how eye movement is critical to being able to read. So and we have ways of testing this. So we can, all kinds of high tech, low tech would be, we've got standardized tests where there's numbers on a page that they read off and we time them and see how fast they can go.
Okay.
To high tech eye tracking devices that will graph out and quantify in very nuanced ways how eye tracking works.
Okay.
A very treatable condition that we can work with and see dramatic improvements in terms of someone's ability. So if you know someone who's like this, like really smart, but never reads a book.
Yeah.
That's, that you probably met many of those folks. They're like,
well, that's my younger brother.
yeah. So they're super, super smart. They got a lot of, you can talk to them. And that's where I get a lot of my patients, honestly, is like the parents have a family of 5. Johnny is clearly the brightest in the group.
Okay.
And he struggles to read.
Okay.
But I got these other kids, and let's be honest, you kind of know. Their attitude's maybe not as good, but reading is just like a piece of cake. They're like, something's up here.
Yeah, what's going on? Yeah.
Yeah, so that's trainable too, and it's a little bit of expanding the peripheral vision, and also the timing mechanism. So you might have heard, your audience might have heard of colored overlays or Irlen lenses or things like that helping reading. Well, what that does as a crutch is help this switching from, when we read, we're literally going from central system, which is information intaking, to movement system and back and forth.
Okay.
And so people struggle with that switching, and the colored overlays help some people do that. So that's one quick thing you can do if your child's struggling reading, is try usually blue, but different colors for different people, and see if it helps them a little. But it's just a crutch,
So you could put some kind of color see-through color thing or something over what they're reading, and see if that helps improve their reading.
Yeah, like the craft stores, and I think like sometimes you create visuals or something within it, just a clear plastic, like see-through.
Yeah, transparent plastic that has like some kind of color on it.
Yeah, and it can help people in a pinch. And I think I might have sent you and put in the notes, but like there are lookup. If your audience is going, wow, this sounds like my kid, there's resources where you can look up doctors that do what I do with vision therapy. And it's easy to test this stuff and easy to find out. The thing is that's a little tough is it does take some work, and this isn't cheap. I wish it were different, but it's very labor intensive, to do this sort of stuff. So there is that. And they tested it. Like they tested the convergence insufficiency, and they said, can't we do something simple without bringing them in the office? And the studies proved out you really have to.
Okay.
But the simple route doesn't work, and the tracking's a little more complex. But in the modern world, let's be real. Like, sadly, it's this way. But reading is critical. Even if your brother who probably did real well and is doing real well.
Yeah.
You have to go through that narrow gate of like, there are things like ACT tests, and there are things like you are forced into that crucible of the reading world, whether you like it or not.
Oh, I have some brilliant friends. One of my buddies works at NASA and does like all their simulations for the rocket booster separation and all this stuff, but won't read a book to save his life.
Well, we know what his track is.
Probably. Yeah, probably.
Yeah. So it's a fairly common thing,
Wow.
So, but it's good to know that there is, so for a quality of life, and, if someone, spends a bit of money to fix that, but it opens doors, just like, I'm a geek about reading stuff. So if I didn't have the ability, I mean, we do have resources. We've got videos and things nowadays for people, truthfully, but if you can read efficiently, it does help you a lot in life, even on a personal level, more than just, making more money and things like that too.
Well, it is, like you're saying, it is essential to read in the language that you speak and all that, because, even to do things as simple as like being able to read a technical manual to be able to repair something if you need to, or something like that. Or, we have YouTube now, which is really good for people that are, have a problem with that. But, if you're able to read, you can do so much. Like you're saying, it really opens your world up.
YouTube's been my savior. Like, inside baseball is like, you probably have thought of this, Greg, as you look at me and you look at your father and you just question if they really came from the same family.
Yeah.
Right? My brother Dan can tear apart and put anything together.
Yeah.
And I can do very basic mechanical type stuff if I spend 5 hours on YouTube for every, hour of work I'm doing.
Yeah.
It's just, and I'm thankful of this too. I think of like, I was born at the right time. My deficit, I can read a book and I can read and pull information out of it.
Yeah.
But I'm terrible at auditory processing. So if I were alive a couple hundred years ago, I'd be that village idiot where you'd have to tell me to do things over and over and over and just,
Yeah. If there was like, you had to work like in a factory or something like that.
It's like, what did he say again? I was born at the right time. We quantify someone's success more by, vision than probably ever before in some senses. So
yeah, and different people, that brings up a good point. Is like, people learn in a bunch of different ways, and for me personally, I'm a very visual and kinesthetic learner. So if somebody can show me what they're doing by hand, and then I can do it by hand, I pick that stuff up really, really fast.
Yeah.
But then, I love to read, so I read all kinds of stuff. And so if I watch a YouTube video and, I can get out there and try to repeat what these people are doing, I can usually pick it up pretty good. But
yeah, it is good to do it in as many ways as possible, just from a brain function standpoint. Because, there are learning styles, but there's so many things you can't do with one style. You can't get it all in one way. So the more ways you can access it, the better.
Yeah. So do you think this issue has kind of popped up more in the modern age, or has this probably always been around? It's just right now that you're actually starting to have been able to recognize it and diagnose it better?
Yeah, I think it is a bit of a modern thing, although, the demands of a modern life are gonna, make it more obvious too. So, you think of like reading is an incredibly new thing. Like, so the printing press is 1400. So in human development, you couldn't even, the ability to afford a book before that was astronomical, So,
right.
So it's a pretty new development as human existence goes. And then there's so much more and more demand on it. But then it's also life in the modern world where it gets back to the blue light issue and the central vision issue. So I think a lot of this dysfunction is caused by people not living the way we used to. So if I'm sequestered inside and I'm staring at a TV screen or a video console or my phone,
you don't have the need to go outside of or go into your peripheral vision as much.
Yeah. You don't develop, like, where we see a predominance of this really show up is when you have these kids that aren't, so they're adopted from Romania, so their development was very poor. They were in a large institution, they weren't held, they didn't move.
Okay.
Then you see, so vision development comes on after motor development. So that's just the hierarchy. If we go through and we move, and then after we are pretty good at movement, we start developing our visual system in a more nuanced way. So anything that affects motor development can affect vision. So I think that's a lot of why it's just like the blue light issue now. And a thing that's really big in our field now is the myopia epidemic, which really gets back to your question. One thing that's for clear is modern life has developed into nearsightedness. So, and a lot of that is a blue light issue and a movement issue. So one of the big correlations to myopia development, nearsightedness development, is related to time spent outside.
Really?
So if a child spends less than an hour and a half outdoors, they have an increased chance of developing nearsightedness. So, and that's a blue light, that's a light spectrum issue, and it's probably even a more complex issue than that. It's probably a little bit of a movement and different things. But, you know, sadly, just life in the modern world. I mean, so much of this, like, you know, we need to eat organically and we need to do all this stuff that seems like, you know, we need to wear orange glasses. So much of these heroic efforts. But if you think about it, really what we're saying is we should live like our great-great-grandparents.
Yeah. Yeah. We're just not made to live like we do now. Or,
Yes.
yeah. So, yeah, it's very wild because, okay, so I love to be outside. I love to be in nature.
Mm-hmm.
And just sitting there in the woods, like when we go hunting, for example, just sitting there in the woods and sitting there in silence, and then that it really does open your senses to be able to pick up little things, like if you're just sitting there and looking for motion and things like that. You know, it really makes you more sensitive to motion and to movements and things like that.
Oh, yeah.
From my personal experience.
And you think of Aboriginal people and their skill sets and how they were in tune with the earth and all those things. I mean, that's a whole interesting area that I think, you know, we've lost. So
yeah, I've come across, you know, some of this information from that recent conference I went to. Is I met this guy, Clive DeCarl, and he was talking about the importance of finding and foraging wild foods for your health as well.
Yeah.
And he was talking about how, you know, these different foods in the wild have to compete with all these other plants, and so they actually take up different minerals, trace minerals, and things like that can really help your health out.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, and I think eating things that are normal to your local environment is something I've heard other experts talk about as being something important.
Yeah, I think it helps tremendously, especially with your immune system. We did get a question in the audience series from Solo Viner. He asked, have you ever come across somebody with aphakia, where they can see in the infrared and ultraviolet spectrums?
That's a good question. That's a good question. Not that I've come across someone, but and we probably should bring up Jack Cruz and talk about some of his thoughts too. But like he's big, you know. Classically, we say there's no ultraviolet light that can penetrate the eye, but he differs. He thinks that there is some aspect to where that can occur, but aphakia is when you've got the lens removed. So that would be one of the barriers. So
okay,
there's a lot to be learned, is a simple way, and I'm not the expert on this whole, what does it mean to see a real spectrum of light versus a faulty spectrum of light? We can point to the extremes. I mean, the obvious is what we've talked about quite a bit, is extreme blue in the day is bad for our retina. Any light at night is going to disrupt us. But there's a whole lot. You know, the more you talk to people that are really in the know, the more you get, they'll tell you we've scratched the surface, but there's so much more to know. That's how you can trust that they're really good, you know? So
yeah. So yeah, if you want to get into this guy that you've come across in your studies, his name is Jack Cruz, right?
yeah, and I'll pull up his little thing. Well, here's just a nice thing. A meme. He's good at these memes, like
Yeah.
talk about the importance of sun. But so yeah, the backstory there is one of my deep dives in truth seeking was the whole diet continuum, where how do I optimize my health? And so when I get into something, it's like it's at least a 50 book start, and
Yeah.
I read all the paleo stuff and I listened to all these podcasts, and this seems logical. And people haven't done it. Paleo is just kind of this idea of like, what's the diet we evolved on? Like, how did we become what we are? And is that maybe an avenue to understand how to optimize our diet? And so I think it's a good paradigm to at least set a thinking process. It may not be correct. It may not be that we, need to forage for our food like they did and stuff, but at least it's a good thought.
Uh-huh.
And in getting into that community, I ran across this guy, Jack Cruz, and Jack Cruz is a neurosurgeon who he is, one of these polymath genius guys who just can go from any physics discussion to biochemistry to any kind of science, and probably talk to the top people in the field and know what the current research is and what's going on, and having and explain them all.
Uh-huh.
So his basic, I think how I would explain Jack is he's really connected how physics and biology cross talk, and that's what's really lacking is our professions can come up with like this blue light triggering poor sleep. This was worked out. Well, the cell was found 15 years ago in the retina, but they kind of knew that there was something going on with it. They just hadn't done the hard work of getting the cell diagnosed or discovered. But so you have, if you look at his work, he'll reference work from the 40s, 50s. Some of the electrical work was done by Russians. He actually went and had translated a lot of this Russian work. So we were doing things here. Talk about what we use. We use a light therapy called syntonics to expand peripheral vision, for example. So there's a treatment just by using light, and it balances your sympathetic parasympathetic system when you get the right light affect using syntonics, and that can really expand your peripheral vision.
Wow.
But it's doing some of these light things and what I'm doing in vision therapy and that, and then I run across him and he's talking kind of similar things that really drew me in to really study what Jack's talking about. And so I think your listeners, if they haven't heard of him, would love to hear some of his stuff. If you're that sciencey kind of person, he can break your brain pretty quick though, with the intensity of some of the levels are pretty high.
Yeah, we have some really smart cookies in this audience. There's a lot of the audience, just like this solo miner just came in with that question about ultraviolet light, because he found out that he takes ultraviolet light photography. He does ultraviolet light photography because there's some sensor in your camera that brings in the full color spectrum or whatever. But if you remove it, then it just picks up the ultraviolet light spectrum. So he does ultraviolet light photography and blogs about it.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah. So yeah. There's some a lot of this stuff that we're talking about is stuff I love to talk about, for one thing. Yeah. But then we have a lot of people that are very curious people in this audience too. So
that's good, and they would have the skill sets to dig a little deeper in what he's talking about and make sense of it. Like I'm pretty good as far as science goes, but I mean, like I'm a little removed from the hard part of it. Like one of my kind of most depressing moments was my middle daughter Shannon was walking through, talking on her phone, counseling someone on calculus, and I was like, that was my jam in school. It just came to me like I didn't even have to study, and I couldn't understand. Wow. I couldn't even understand a word she was talking about. It's like I'm old, and I'm like, well, But I guess one of my gifts is that I'm not afraid of going in over my head. So a lot of times when I've read Jack's blogs, it's like, geez, I wish I had 3 more PhDs and I'd be able to get there. But at least the basics aren't really complicated. Like, so his like basic paradigm is you should eat like a shark and sleep like a polar bear. Okay, so if you could break that down, that's key catchphrase. But it's like you need omega-3s and you need a low sugar diet. You need what would be somewhat of a paleo diet, but not just grass-fed beef, but even you need the seafood, right, to get the omega-3s. And then we've talked about the light and the sleep. There's a lot of things you can do on that. But you need to sleep good and eat properly and follow the light cycles properly.
Okay.
And so there's a lot of things that he has. You can look at his blogs and his different things if you want to really dig in a little further.
Yeah.
Probably the one other thing we could talk about, and then just I'm on his blog here, but cold thermogenesis, but I can just chat on that if you want to go into that a little bit. Because you got people in Canada you mentioned, and at least they got cold is free up there last time I knew.
They got all the cold they can handle. Yeah.
That's free health right there, but you got to take what you can get, If you sun, that's great. You can optimize your use of the sun, but so it gets into the mitochondria stuff, right? So to optimize the function of your mitochondria, if you get in cold, you immerse yourself in cold. So you can start with simple like face dunks, where you put your face in cold water and get used to that.
Okay.
You can take cold showers, although I've found those even difficult than the true, like getting in the full water. But if you do, what's best is, you turn that cold shower and you just stand still and you acclimate to it better than moving around. But you can just basically put ice in a bathtub and get that water to maybe like 50 degrees and sit in there for a half hour. And what it does is it's shocking when people who are listening to this are like, this is crazy. There's no way I could ever do that. But you'd be surprised what happens when you get in there. It's horrible for a few seconds, but your skin reacts and sends blood to the surface, and you really can sit there. And I've never had trouble doing it. The only hard part is when you get out, because you shiver for a while, and it's a little tough, until you get more used to it.
Yeah.
But what that does simply is optimize the function of your mitochondria.
Okay.
And you can get into, really it gets into a whole complex discussion of structured water and these different things in terms of how the mitochondria really works and how we are electrical beings and how you can, optimize that. But,
so the mitochondria is, well, from what I remember from my public education, the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, right?
Yeah. So we think that from a developmental standpoint, that it was originally a bacteria that then enveloped into the cell, and so. But it is the power. It's the power structure for our, everything. All power we create is through the mitochondria. So.
Yeah, I've been kind of looking into the Wim Hof method, and Wim Hof talks. He's the guy that's famous. They call him the Iceman.
Yeah.
And he dunks himself into like ice water baths and stuff like that,
Exactly.
and really talks about how that's benefited himself and into reaching these new heights of consciousness and things like that.
Yeah, he's amazing, and he's basically done that at a very, very high level. And I think we chatted about this too. Is like, and he says this. He has whole courses you can take on that. Is he's not anything special. I mean, he may be a little special in the sense, everyone has a little more intensity maybe than another, or skill set or whatever. He's really taken it on quite in an intense way.
Yeah.
The fact that you could simply immerse yourself in cold water and not have problem doing it, anyone can do that. Anyone can learn to do that, as crazy as it seems.
Yeah.
I can do it, and I'm someone who walks around in the winter with cold hands all the time, and I'm like, gosh, I wish I had better circulation. So I'm someone, if I hadn't done it before, would think there's no way I could do that. But
Yeah, and he talks about how you can kind of just work yourself up to going colder and colder, just like you're talking about. And in fact, that's probably what you want to do, because if you just go all of a sudden into extremely cold water, that could be bad. But
you'd want to be measured, and but yeah, you could just like the way I do it is you just take milk jugs and freeze them, and then put it in a bathtub, and you could start that with just your feet in, your legs in, your whatever, and then just work your way up to whatever level. And but that is, I'm sure if you get on YouTube and go through cold thermogenesis and listen, there's many people that'll talk about escapes me now, but there's a researcher that's done a lot with it too. Kind of was, I think, originally with like Navy SEALs units and stuff like that, but now does cold type research too.
Yeah, I remember it was part of my physical therapy when I had a really bad sprain on my right ankle from a snowboarding thing, and I hurt my ankle really bad. And part of the physical therapy was to wrap this cold compress thing around the ankle, and then they just got it like super, super cold after we did all this other stuff in the physical therapy session.
Yeah, and it's kind of, you think of the swelling, and that's the obviously something pathological, and the cold reduces swelling. So, and I'm gonna murder this. Apologize to Jack, but he will talk about that in terms of astrophysics. When you have a supernova expanding,
Whoa.
what's going on there.
Yeah.
Okay. So the same physics that applies to your mitochondria applies to, right? We have physical laws that are universal, right? So why should anything be different? If it's physics, it's physics. It's just our job to figure out how does that work on a microscopic level and a macroscopic level.
Yeah.
But so you're shrinking, you're doing so our to put it, and this is very simply, but all of our surfaces are very incredible, basically antennas, right? So our eye is a very exquisite antenna. Our skin is an antenna. It senses the environment. And so by immersing it in cold, it communicates with our mitochondria in a very profound way. So that's a very simplified way, of talking about it, but there's a lot of physics involved in terms of how that all works out.
Yeah, so I've heard in a lot of what I've run across is that inflammation is the cause of most disease. And disease is dis-ease.
Yes.
So
that's true for like in an obvious way in my field is dry eye is a very common problem. And that's true. And that's another health thing that people run into as you use more screen time, you blink less. There's a whole aspect of the blue light being a factor in it. But when you have symptoms, you're feeling inflammation. So anything you can do in a dry eye sense to reduce inflammation, you improve your situation. Little example, but yeah, for sure. Cardiovascular disease, it's fundamentally an inflammatory process that, gets that ball rolling. So
yeah. So it's a lot of other things. It's all kind of interrelated about just like you were describing, is that our internal systems are similar to the external ones as far as how the galaxies and everything work and supernova and things like that. It's similar on all scales.
Yeah.
So this Jack Cruz guy kind of goes into a lot of that type of stuff as well, right? Like kind of the,
For sure. So for your audience who really is, got pretty good chops in the physics arena, they can get the actual like connection. Like he does do the actual breakdown, like, top level physics, like from the latest research, in anything you can really understand it at a deep level. I wish I could translate it a little better, but absolutely. and it just makes perfect sense, right? Is that it's in our mitochondria. It's an electron transport change. You learned that, we all learned that in biology. So it's not a fat transport chain. It's not a protein, which is, if you talk about diet, it's like, what are your macros? What are you consuming and everything? But at the fundamental level, there's electrons moving down a chain that create energy. So we're an electrical being. If if that electricity flows, that's death. If that flow stops, that's death, right?
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, and we were talking about how water is very important as well, and how there's even this fourth state of water is some kind of structured water as well as part of health. And I know you had a few book recommendations on some of that kind of stuff as well.
Yeah, and that's well, I'll scroll down to it, but if you're showing my page, I think a lot of your readers might like this book, Life on the Edge. Is that's how you connect quantum mechanics in biology, like he talks about an example of how photosynthesis is using quantum mechanics. And there's a funny story in there, as I recall, about there's a group at MIT trying to develop a quantum computer, and they read an article by a group, I think it was, California School, of how they're starting to develop this theory about photosynthesis, and they're laughing like, oh, that's nuts, but it actually has been shown to be the case. So, it makes sense that quantum mechanics, biology figured it out a while ago. We're just discovering it. But to get back to the water thing, this fourth phase of water by Pollack is a great, and it's a pretty easy read. That's a good, and it's how water gets structured and what physical properties happen that structure the water.
Yeah, I remember, my buddy Robbie and we talk about quite a bit of this stuff, but he turned me on to Gerald Pollack and let me watch one of his lectures, and he was talking about how you get this exclusion zone that happens when you watch water flowing through a pipe or something like that. There's like a very small layer in the water that has like kind of a crystalline property or something like that.
Yeah, and I think that's the crux of what cold thermogenesis does in your mitochondria. Is it shrinks
the exclusion zone of the water.
I believe it makes it more efficient by changing the actual physics of your mitochondria.
Wow.
Let me put it that way a little more broadly, because I'm not, precise on it's been a while since I've read that. So I'm not, I don't claim to be an expert on this stuff, but, it's all there for your guys to read. And the body electric would be another one. So that's Becker's book. And just, if you really want to take a deeper dive into how Becker's someone who studied regrowing bone and is an expert on how electricity works with human beings for good or bad. So,
okay. And that kind of has a lot. Does he kind of get into some of these things about EMFs and their effects on the body?
Yeah. There's plenty of other, people that this is some of the original understanding of that, but there's other people that talking about, the negatives of, modern EMFs and stuff. But he really researched electricity and its effect on, human function a lot. So it's a good read.
Cool. So you said one of the Life on the Edge, that was kind of something that kind of brought you down that road, or it was kind of more towards the paleo diet and figuring out all of that diet that kind of like started getting you to look more and more into these different topics?
Yeah, Life on the Edge is more of a just, good, just how does, if you really want to know, and it's fairly current book, and he quotes fairly current science about this connection, this concept of physics and biology being intimately related.
Okay.
Because in standard school, you probably had this experience. You go to the physics department and you learn physics. And you go to the biology department, you learn biology. But we just kind of pretend that they don't really
relate to each other,
get close to each other.
Yeah.
Like a silly analogy would be, I mentioned at the very beginning, I went to Bascom Palmer's, like a world-renowned eye hospital. And on one day I'd work in the retina clinic, and then the other day I'd work in the cornea clinic. And you would think, those people look, and it's just the eyeball, but those doctors look at the eye in such a radically different perspective.
Yeah.
That's just a silly little analogy of like, that's not even separating different professions and different focuses. You've probably heard this, but the whole idea of using something other than drugs and surgery was more accepted at one time.
Yes, it was. Yes, up until like the early or like maybe mid 1900s, I think, is when they started to get into the petrochemical pharmaceuticals and started to change the whole philosophy of that.
Yeah, and I think there was a lot in this syntonics I mentioned. There was a lot of work being done originally to do more than just vision. One of the starters was trained both as an optometrist and as a physician, and he was treating all kinds of conditions using light. But it came along at that time where, he was a pretty unusual guy too. A lot of people just didn't adopt what he did or understand things at his level probably. But it also came along at the wrong era, right? Because, they just got rid of all that stuff. You're just not allowed to use electricity.
That's interesting that you bring that up because I believe, Clive DeCarl, when I met him recently, he had this suite of machines that were Nikola Tesla's inventions, apparently, called violet ray devices. And you could see these things all over the country up until, like I was saying, like in the mid 1900s, and there were these electrical devices that were emitting these. He says it's scalar energy, but Tesla had figured out that this whole electrical idea of just like you're saying, that the ion exchange or whatever plays a part in it, I believe. But created this whole suite of devices, and then they just kind of go away.
Yeah, I think there was an era where they literally went in and destroyed a lot of that stuff. And maybe there was, I don't know the whole story, maybe there were some bad things. Nothing's perfect. Drugs aren't perfect. Drugs, let's not throw them totally under the bus. You got to go back to when we had epidemics and stuff. And modern medicine is what it is. It's a lot of miracles and a lot of, less than ideal things maybe. But, but I think, we're getting back to it though, because we have like cold lasers. If you go to your orthopedic surgeon, they may do a steroid injection, or they may use a series of cold lasers and things, because what that does is help your mitochondria. So they are, using light to heal again.
Wow.
We are coming full circle. So
that's interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. Cold lasers.
Yeah, it's basically a high energy, like red spectrum usually, that can penetrate and
deeper in the tissue.
Yeah, and it gets back to, I'm going to pull this back up. So if you go through, Jack's going to talk about how, one of the things that happens when you get in the sun is your skin turns a little red, right? And your blood goes to the surface, and you're basically irradiating your blood. And
okay.
So,
yeah,
you can take a deep dive to this. We're more like a plant than you think. Like getting sun on your skin is got some health benefits. Like it creates vitamin D. It sulfates things in your blood and does certain chemistry things that you can't get otherwise. So the best way to get vitamin D is to get it naturally.
From just natural sunlight, yeah.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean you have to be out in the sun for 6 hours or get a sunburn, which can be negative. It's that U curve again, right? So you can, there's an app you can get called D-Minder, and you can, plug in your location and find out like exactly how much sun you need to get what amount of vitamin D. But
Oh, interesting.
yeah, but you can, if you're lucky enough to be, in a warmer climate right now, you can take advantage of that. But, that's
Yeah.
why we try to go south a little bit during the winter so we can
Soak up some more sun.
Yeah, and I have an artificial lamp we use of UV light, like a tanning type thing. And we try to use that a little bit to just get something. I'm not sure exactly how much benefit we get.
Yeah.
But it's trying to help us a little bit, because
Yeah.
we're about 4 or 5 months of UV deficient, where even if you were outside doing cold thermogenesis or something, you're not getting UV light to your skin. So
Yeah. So it's different for the different types of people of different skin colors. So like if you're a white person and you need less sunlight, right?
That's a great point you bring up.
Than a darker skinned person.
Exactly. So like the science, as I understand it, is so we all come out of Africa, right? So after we were out of Africa and out of that climate for 1,000 years, that's enough time for our pigment to change.
Yeah.
And we adapt because of the lack of sun. And so we optimize as we evolve so that we can develop vitamin D with less sun exposure. So, your natural pigment of where your, ancestry's from is kind of critical to your health. So, I come from this ancestry of English, like you can get DNA testing done, and there's 7 groups, from African to, I'm the 7th one, and so we are probably the most, capable of getting the least amount of sun because of that evolutionary process. But for those people who have a darker pigmentation, they need to even take it more seriously, is because they need more sun to develop the proper amount of vitamin D.
Right.
So, and how much is that talked about, right? So like,
yeah,
it'd be nice to have a program for people with different colors to have maybe, if we had a perfect health system, we'd have, commercial tanning booths for those folks. And,
yeah,
if you're darker, you get a discount, right? Because, it's like part of what you need. So,
yeah. So part of this, the whole detox thing that I've looked into is that, infrared saunas are one of the big things that are used in this whole detox program. It gets your sweat to get going so that you can pull, harmful things toxins out of the body through your sweat. And then I guess also that infrared actually maybe interacts with the mitochondria as well as a possibility.
And with your bloodstream. So there's a combination of UV and infrared light that basically optimizes your blood and creates, a higher energy in your blood too.
Yeah. So one of the things that I was watching, I think it was a Clive DeCarl video, or maybe Dr. John Bergman. He's also a really good guy. That was saying that cholesterol is a good thing because cholesterol in the blood interacts with sunlight and it creates the vitamin D.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's the way we were engineered, is to get vitamin D is through UV and through, and that is the precursor to vitamin D. Is you need cholesterol to produce vitamin D and a lot of hormones. So, obviously it's not an evil element. Our body produces it.
Yeah. So yeah, it's we got some great talks about. Actually, Peachy in the audience says that she has to take vitamin D supplements. She was tested low on vitamin D. She's another one of our northerners. So
yeah, it's hard. So if you can use artificial means, and I'm no expert at it, but try to do that a little bit too. And then when you can, when the climate allows, is get, and then I think, that's where Aboriginal northern communities have eaten also a diet rich in vitamin D. You know, that's
Okay.
an interesting thing too. Like some communities would normally make sure that pregnant women got certain parts of the, whether it be the liver or something, I think,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
or whatever was really dense in vitamin D.
I think it's liver.
Yeah. Because they just, and I mean, isn't that wonderful? They had no blogs to read or, these kind of things. And yet somehow they figured it out.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Well, that was one of the things that Clive de Carl talks about, and he's saying that we have all these trace minerals that we're devoid of in our diets, but a very simple test is to take a dilution of each one of the minerals and put it into a purified water or whatever, and then you can test yourself by just taking that dropper and putting it on your tongue, and the ones that you're deficient in will taste sweet, or it'll taste it'll taste like water. But if you have enough of the thing, it'll taste disgusting to you. So we just have this like natural thing in our taste buds that will tell us, what we're deficient in. So you don't really have to go through these expensive blood tests. You can just make these things and then test it yourself to see what all you're deficient in.
That's interesting.
Yeah, you would like that Clive de Carl guy. I think definitely.
That innate ability is pretty impressive. Like you've probably heard of the story, the old dirty shirt experiment, right? Where genetically they did this study where they had women smell, shirts that men have worn, and just based on that, I know this sounds silly, but based on that, determine their preference. And when they analyzed it, the women picked the male that would create the most strongest immune system in their offspring.
Interesting.
Isn't that
Wow.
crazy?
Yeah, that is pretty crazy.
The intuitive, how we've got these things that are so intuitive in our system,
Yeah. Yeah, it's biology is fascinating. When you talk about this Jack Cruz guy and then some of this epigenetics thing, well, I guess we didn't really get into that, but that could be a whole topic in and of itself, because Rupert Sheldrake wrote this book called Morphic Resonance. And in that book, he does talk a lot about this epigenetic thing, which is like it's these adaptations that are made by biological beings that are adapting to the local environment. And one of his examples that he gave is a fruit fly, and the one fruit fly may adapt these like spines on its back to maybe help it in its environment. And then the offspring has a more pronounced spine. The next generation does, that it inherits this adaptation. And you can see that these little adaptations happen through biology.
Yeah, I mean, epigenetics is a very, very powerful thing. Like I've heard them study, even like if you look at the descendants of Auschwitz, I know there was a study of like that created anxiety for generations. It really changes your genetics when you go through certain things, for better or worse. That's why I think, while I'm an optimist and things are getting a lot better, the thing that we're benefiting from is that our grandparents ate organic food and lived on the farm, but the epigenetics, if we keep going the way we are, if we keep just traumatizing our system with altered spectrums, processed food, and all this in a high stress lifestyle, and keep repeating that generation over generation, you're going to see it manifest, in all kinds of not so ideal ways.
Yeah.
It's a powerful thing, but it's also a powerful thing that, that if you're optimizing yourself, you're doing it for your kids and grandkids, perhaps. Right. So.
Right. you're epigenetically, or you're changing your adaptations, I guess, and passing that information on to the next generation.
Yeah, you're connected.
Yeah, that's the other thing that kind of come across with all this stuff is how everything is connected. It's all part of this ever increasing complexity. Yeah,
which should ultimately make people feel grounded and good, right? Like, there's kind of a uniformity to how we're all structured, and we're kind of all in this together, and
Yeah, right. Then that's a really good thing to kind of end on here. We're coming up on the end of the show, and if there's anything else that you'd like to maybe close out the show with, then I'll give you the last word.
Well, I just thankful for the time, and I think it went by really quick. Like I told you, Greg, can we talk for 2 hours? I think we could go for another 2. But,
yeah.
but hopefully it'll be before we see each other in the cabin, in a couple of years too. So,
absolutely.
Just thanks for having me on. And I just hope that someone got some help out of it and maybe a little entertainment too. And so, kudos to you and what you're doing and your audience, because, we're all in this together, just trying to help each other out. So it's a wonderful thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's just one of the big things is just trying to get some knowledge out there, and everybody has something. The last guest I had on said something really great. He said, everybody's got something to teach, and then we all have something to learn. And so it's, I just kind of, that's part of the mentality. And I forgot to say my motto, and my motto for the show is I will be an inextinguishable light of possibilities for myself and others. And so if you just keep, if we all just kind of keep focusing on these things and what we can do to change our personal lives, I think that really will expand outwardly and to help the future overall. So thank you.
I think it's just, everyone has a mission and no one can replace you. So you're on a mission and you can impact the people around you the way nobody else can. So
absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, again, thank you so much for your time today and being able to sit down and share with the audience, this knowledge that you have, and maybe we can get you plugged into this community and maybe get you an account on Steam or something like that.
Yes. Okay. Thanks a lot, Greg. Take care.
Yep, you bet. Thank you so much, and thank you everybody that stayed and sat in for the show today, and everybody's interaction on the show. And we'll have another episode of Meadows and Makers next week. And coming up, we have Crimson Clad Steamwave Saturday, where she gets to share with everybody everything that's happening now on Steam It, and we get to hang out and kind of listen to some music and stuff and have a good Steam chat. So thanks again, everybody that came to hang out, and we're going to play you guys out by a track by Divine and Junk Feathers. It's called Awake by Divine and Junk Feathers. Thank you, guys. We'll see you next week.